Good afternoon, everybody. Perhaps good morning if you're not on this east coast of this country. But is it a good morning or good afternoon? We are sitting here on this Thursday with, man, Cody, I can't even, I was going to try to come up with some great joke or sarcasm that this is one of the best games we've ever covered, but it's the lowest total NFL game total since 1980. I think it's 29.5, 30, depending where you're looking. It's the Bailey Zappi-led New England Patriots heading into Pittsburgh to face the Mitch Trubisky-led Steelers. This is what we're here for, Cody. The money's the same, right? That's what Adam always says. How you doing today?
The money is the same. 29.5 point total. Me coming from the Big Ten, being a fan of Nebraska football, this actually feels like it's got some shootout potential, given the fact that I've dealt with Iowa, Nebraska. I've dealt with Michigan, Nebraska, which Michigan covered the point total in their own right. But I've come from bad football, so this is kind of right up my alley. And jokes aside, I do think that the field tends to make a few more mistakes in these types of games. I think if you're paying attention to projections, if you're paying attention to the Showdown breakdown, if you're paying attention to this show, you should have a little bit of an edge just based off of, I think that there's going to be people out there double and triple counting things that are already accounted for, of course, in the total, but in projections, in ownership, and all those things as well. So hopefully a little bit of a bigger edge, as gross as this game might be.
Yeah, I agree. Seems like the chat is fired up, though. True degen game for sure. As Aggravate says, there's some good energy coming from this chat. We'll see if we can establish any kind of edge here. It's really ugly. George, that's cool. My brother goes to James Madison. I'll throw that out there. I'll ask him about it. All right, Cody, when you were studying for this beautiful slate, studying, writing, whatever you want to call it, torturing yourself, what'd you pull away? Anything exciting here?
Yeah, I think very, very, very high level is salary does not much matter on this slate. Of course, as always, you're going to be able to run into teams that you don't have enough of the salary cap. It's going to go over the 50K. You can't build the team that you want to build because you want to try and jam in some of the studs. But for all intents and purposes, if you're building even a 10 entry lineup portfolio, a 20 max portfolio, certainly a 150 max portfolio, I would adjust your salary expectations way down for this slate. Our ownership adjusted salary expectations came in right around 48.2. Just for example, like most of the times when we're running our ownership, generally, across 600% total ownership, 100% captain ownership, that number is going to come out to like 49.5, 49.6. Sometimes it's going to push really close to 50K. And on those slates, it lets me know that, hey, the salary cap's really tight. It's going to be hard for me to build teams underneath the 50K salary cap. And for me, who's trying to be a little bit more unique, if I'm using anything less than 49.5 for kind of an arbitrary example, I'm going to be pretty close to being unique. On this slate, however, Ramondre Stevenson was the most expensive player. He's been ruled out. George Pickens is the next most expensive player. He's got like the 7th highest base projection on the slate. You've got Bailey Zappi, who's got a projection under 10 DraftKings points. Basically, what I'm getting at is the players further down the board in terms of salary are projecting nearly as well as the players at the very top of the slate. And so when you have things like that happen, you need to adjust your salary-based expectations down quite a bit. So if you're using salary as a means to get unique, maybe you normally start at like 49.5 like I do. Maybe you want to bump that down even further, 49.2, 49 flat, somewhere in that range as a way to get lineups that are going to be a little bit less duplicated. So that's kind of point number one. Salary doesn't much matter on this slate. Point number two, even though both of these offenses are disgusting, we're going to get Mitch Trubisky-led Steelers offense. It looks like the field is going to be funneled into quite a bit of 4-2 and even 5-1 Steelers heavy stuff. And I think a lot of that is just because of those team totals funneling into projections and because of just how gross and how run heavy and how inefficient the Patriots offense has been to this point. You're not going to get a ton of volume on the Patriots side. So people are going to really be focusing on as many Steelers options as they can get comfortable with. So I do think if you're willing to kind of lean into a little bit of a contrarian game script, maybe think Bailey Zappi can go out and keep this thing close or put up points on the Steelers defense, you're going to get paid off with a nice ownership discount on anything that is Patriots heavy, whether it's 2-4, certainly 1-5. And, we kind of saw that come to fruition on the last Showdown show that we did, Gary, with the Jacksonville Bengals stuff, with the Bengals stuff coming in really low owned and kind of getting there for us in a big, big way. So if you think this game can play a little bit closer than the 6-point spread would indicate, or if you think that, the Patriots can go out and win outright, then certainly I would consider some of those Patriots heavy lineups in your portfolio.
Yeah, shouts to us with the Jamar Chase, Jake Browning double flag. And we even said, Browning, I said optimal in flex, despite him being a flag plan. I just loved that pairing, and we nailed that one. Hopefully we can do something similar with you guys all tonight. Let's start at the quarterback position. And Cody, you do have to go back to 2018, 2019. So, this is 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But there was a time, I don't know if you remember it, where Mitch Trubisky was not only a viable DFS player, but like a top 7 type DFS quarterback where he was put up 30s and 40s on Chicago as kind of a dual threat. I had up here, let's see, like 2018, he had a stretch weeks 4 through 8 in 2018, 46 DraftKings points, 40, 31, 36, 22, 4 straight weeks. And 2019, something similar, a couple 30s that he got to. Now, again, this is a long time ago, but at least, and a probably better team, which is crazy to think that Bears team was probably better than this Steelers team, or at least his ability to move the ball in offense. But perhaps there's something left in there. The field thinks so as far as ways being played. 22% or 21.2 ceiling projection, 60% total ownership, 8% captain. I think it's really hard for me to talk myself into Zappy over Mitch, but how are you feeling about the two quarterbacks here? I think you're muted.
It's Mitch Trubisky. It's tough to get excited, but I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I get the sense that just based off of the rest of the options we're going to talk about on the slate, of course, defenses we'll get to at the end of the show. Of course, running backs are going to be popular in a game that projects to be as gross as this one. From a cash game perspective, I think just because he's at home, he's under center as a 6-point favorite. He's got the weapons around him. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth is enough for him to get it done, get the ball in their hands, let them do their thing. I get the sense that Trubisky is probably a cash game lock, a cash game must-have necessity. Maybe not a full-blown lock, but he's up there as one of the best cash game options on the entire slate. I don't think it's necessarily a massive drop-off from Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky. He is going to run a little bit. He's not known as a runner, but he's going to take off when he needs to. I think you'll probably see somewhere between like a 10 to 12% rush rate for Mitch Trubisky, which is good enough to add a little bit of a bonus on the ground. And then you kind of have this in your back pocket that if you look at this Patriots defense from any sort of advanced metric, they're much, much, much better against the run than they are against the pass. I don't think that that's going to mean that the Steelers coaching staff is instantly going to go out and try to air it out on the Patriots secondary. I do think, though, that if the Steelers coaching staff gets frustrated with how inefficient their running game is going to be, which I expect it to be, I think that probably means a few more dropbacks from Mitch Trubisky, which leads me to kind of a tournament angle here. Mitch Trubisky is going to get played plenty at flex. I don't think you're going to see a lot of Mitch Trubisky with Steelers wide receiver at captain, or multiple Steelers wide receivers, or tight ends. Throw Pat Freiermuth in the mix with them in the flex. And so I think if you want to get a little bit contrarian here, one way to do that initially off the bat is like Mitch doubles, whether it's Mitch with a guy at captain and another guy in flex, or Mitch at captain with 2 guys in flex. I just think that the field is going to kind of overreact to this 29.5 point game total and really try to steer as clear away as they can from this aerial attack. I think that might be a little bit of a mistake, because I think it's the best way to attack this pretty stout Patriots defense.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to completely ignore Bailey Zappi, right? I talked last week when I see a quarterback with like a 30% total ownership. I like that. Obviously, Jake Browning and Geno Smith, which were our last 2 examples of that, or much higher ceiling plays in better game environments as well. And that was kind of the Browning argument. So like, this could be a good game environment for him. Jacksonville's been beat through the air. Maybe they could push. You don't have any of those same arguments in a 29.5 team total here with Bailey Zappi. We have some sample of the kind of quarterback he is. I think calling him a game manager is generous. So like a want-to-be game manager maybe is what I would call Bailey Zappi. I don't know what kind of ceiling is there. This is on the road against a Pittsburgh defense that is still would be considered a good unit. I love the idea of a 30% quarterback that's only 9K, but again, I'm having a difficult time getting there this week.
It's been pretty ugly, and I'm trying to find like a bull case to even paint for Bailey Zappi. We've got a pretty extended preseason sample of him dating back to 2022. In 3 games in 2022, he attempted 71 preseason passes, had a 63.4% completion rate, 6.5 yards per attempt, 1 to 3 touchdown to interception ratio. Even worse in 2023, 51 attempts, 58.8% completion percentage, 5.0 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. It feels like, and this is all anecdotal, but it feels like he's at least had routes where he's had plays where he's tried to push the ball down the field. Hasn't necessarily been successful, but we've seen him come in relief and occasionally, make a couple of plays here and there. The whole argument here comes back to the same one that you just alluded to, Gary. It's like, it's a 9K quarterback. He's going to be right in that 30% own range. Everyone's going to be playing the Steelers defense. It's a similar argument to be made for Jake Browning. I just felt a lot better about the game environment for Jake Browning. Not that I necessarily felt better about the player, but you had T. Higgins, you had Jamar Chase, you had capable skill position weapons in a game environment that expected them to drop back a ton. I just think that the New England's going to go out and just establish it. And whether they're really out here to win or not, I think that they're going to be putting the ball in the belly of Zeke Elliott and whoever's backing him up and just kind of moving on with life. I don't necessarily see a huge drop back game for Bailey Zappi. So if you're expecting him to get there, you're kind of expecting him to get there on efficiency, which is tough for a quarterback that A, hasn't been efficient, and is B, going to be going up against the Steelers defense that's been very good in the secondary. So I want to try and paint this bull case for him, because I think it's pretty cool to get a quarterback at 30%, just like we got Jake Browning. I just don't think those huge ceiling games are quite necessarily going to happen way more frequently than he's owned, like we thought for Browning.
Yeah. JD asked if there's any chance Mac plays second half, or even Malik Cunningham, I think would be the more interesting piece. We do have a little bit of a projection there. Have you heard anything to that extent? And would you ever have the balls in a 150 set to like do one Malik Cunningham lineup?
I don't think so, because they made him 6K. You'd have to be pretty confident that Malik's going to get a big role. If they priced him like a backup wide receiver or something like that, and he had a 0.8%, 0.8 base projection, maybe you can get there. But I think, even at 6K, you are expecting him to not, really he's got to play half the game, and he's got to be efficient in the half the game that he gets. So for me, no.
Yeah, I would say, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, finish up.
I don't think that that's a route that I want to go. Just based off of price tag alone. I do think there are paths where Malik has a package or comes in, or they're not
especially
fully committed
with no
to Mac Jones.
I think if they do get to the red zone, like, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they bring him in. And then at 6K, if this game only scores 18 points and he scores a rushing touchdown, so like, I mean, take some balls, but this is a game that probably requires some stones to get unique and figure some shit out. So I don't know. Just saying. It sucks. It sucks.
You brought up a really good point, kind of a more macro point, but like, in a game that doesn't, and as we get to the skill position players here next, this will be an important point to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're going through your hand builds, or you're going through and tweaking your MME set. In a game that doesn't project for a lot of play volume, right? Our kind of baseline assumptions here that both teams try to establish it as much as possible, which means the game clock, the game clock's going to be running. You're probably not going to have as many plays. You're not going to have as many targets, rushing attempts, what have you. In a game like this, these players that have the ability to either A, score a touchdown, of course, but B, more importantly, bust a big play, that type of thing is so much more valuable when you think the game is going to feature low play volume. So as we get to the skill position players, there's a few of them that kind of stand out to me, but a guy that can turn 3 targets into like 260 and 1 is way more valuable in this game than they would be in like a shootout type of game where you have Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon and Evan Ingram and all these guys going off. Then you need that raw volume as well. But in this game where there's not going to be a ton of volume, trying to find those guys that have that big play upside is so much more important.
George's boots on the ground in Foxborough. He said he's spoken to Bill Belichick, and they're going to be playing Malik Cunningham tonight. So just saying, it's, no, I actually think the more I talk about it, I think that if you are full on MMEing, I think you should have a lineup or two with Malik Cunningham. I do. All right. That's my own opinion. Let's talk running backs here. You just set the table that this is going to be a very run heavy matchup. The funny thing is this game's like 29.5, 30. And anything I've listened to or read or watched today is everyone betting the under. I've not seen anyone be interested in the over. And that's at a 30-point total. So that really should tell you everything you need to know. These teams are going to probably keep the ball on the ground. Now, it's not a good matchup for either side in that regard, right? The Patriots you mentioned, have been able to. Patriots have a good defense. That's the weird thing. Like they're an all-time horrible team. They have a good defense in general. Steelers, same deal. I mean, they're not a horrible team. They were 7-5. You know, they've kind of come on the right side of coin flip games, but also a good defense, particularly, you know, some great players in the front seven. So Zeke Elliott priced up as the alpha here. Let's start with him. You know, no Ramondre. I think you put it great in your article where, like, at some point, and especially in a game like this, we just have to like put matchup stuff aside and fully bank on roll and volume here. And I think that's kind of where we're at with Zeke. So 68% total ownership, 18.5% cap ownership. What is this, 2017 Dallas? I mean, come on, this is like crazy shit here. But that's where we're at. My instinct is a fade position, but at that kind of ownership. But that's just kind of like my tournament brain kicking in. How are you feeling about Zeke here?
Yeah. It's funny because I put in the article, like it's the Robin Williams, what year is it .jpg, you know, the meme, like seriously, we're talking about chalk Zeke Elliott in week 14 of 2023. And he's 9,400, the highest owned player on the entire slate. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? But then you kind of take a step back and yes, Ramondre Stevenson already ruled out. You're looking at a Patriots offense, as bad as it's been, they're still going to be run heavy. Look at their 3 games where they've posted, in 3 individual games this season, all season, where they've posted a positive pass rate over expectation. Week 9 against Washington, go figure. Everyone's going to have a positive pass rate over expectation against the Commanders. And then against the Eagles in week 1, when they were, you know, theoretically still a competitive football team, plus 7% positive pass rate over expectation there. And then in week 7 against Buffalo, go figure. 3 games where you would expect them to have a positive pass rate over expectation. All other games, they've had a negative pass rate over expectation. They've been one of the league's run heaviest offenses. Call it what you want. They're just out there to put the ball in their running back's belly and kind of move on. They don't really have the quarterback or skill position talent to execute a high-powered passing attack. And that's kind of what we're expecting here again with Zeke Elliott in the backfield for Ramondre Stevenson. And yeah, I put it again in the article. It's a 6-point road underdog against a really good Steelers run defense that is at least top half of the league in explosive rush rate allowed, stuff rate against, yards per contact before attempt. It's a really tough matchup. It's not a particularly attractive game environment, but we just talked about how we don't expect a bunch of play volume. This is a guy that's still going to get targeted out of the backfield as a receiver. He's still probably going to touch the ball, assuming he comes out of this game healthy, 15 to 17 times as a runner. You add 4 to 5 targets as a receiver, and all of a sudden he looks like one of the best overall plays on the slate. So for cash game contests, for sure, I think he is one of those must-haves right up there with Mitch Trubisky. In tournaments, I do fear, because it's so easy to get up to him at 9,400. It's so easy to make the volume case for him. I do fear that he is going to get steamed up. We're already looking at 18% captain ownership, 68% total ownership. I think the biggest argument against Zeke is that like a huge portion of his range of outcomes is like 15 carries, 55 yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions for like 12 yards, right? And theoretically, you can probably fade that 6.7, 7.7 DraftKings points or something like that. You could probably get away with a fade on that type of position. And so for me, I'm kind of with you, Gary. I think that I want to, while fully understanding that the volume is going to be there, I'm just hoping that it becomes an inefficient performance and I can get away with not having an overweight stance on what I think is a running back passes prime in a very tough matchup.
Yeah, I mean, that's 65 total yards plus 3 catches, right? You're say like right under 10 points. You need the touchdown, even in a game where, I mean, probably at 9-4, you probably need the touchdown in that sense, unless this game truly is like a 6-0 game like the Patriots were in last week. And then maybe you're just all the raw points is what you need. So if this game goes 6-0, like we saw with Chargers Patriots last week, and he has 10 points just from volume, then yeah, you probably need it. But again, 30, like it's very rare there's 6 points scored in an NFL game. Really, really rare. I think it's going to be even rarer that happens 2 weeks in a row with the same team. The Pittsburgh being in Pittsburgh here, I know New England's been a good defense. I think they'll be able to put some points up on the board. Like I just think that at 9-4 you need a touchdown there, and on a game with what's their team total, like 12 or something, 14. Like there's no sure thing that we're getting a touchdown there. So I guess we're projecting JaMychal Hasty here, old friend JaMychal Hasty, as the RB2 as far as a projection standpoint. That becomes a very interesting play at 200. I know we talk about salary not mattering, but if we're just looking as purely a pivot, getting into one of these 3 guys seems like an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, we almost saw it last week with Chase Brown, right? It ultimately didn't matter because Christian Kirk gets hurt and Parker Washington is the guy that goes off on Thursday night, and you needed him to end up in optimal lineups. But Chase Brown came out, and I think on the first drive had like 3 rushing attempts or something like that. And so it just becomes kind of a pure like point standpoint. If they pull the reins back on Zeke a little bit, or JaMychal Hasty's the guy that finds the end zone or something like that, you can certainly build a case where he's optimal, even if it means you leave a bunch of salary on the table. So I do think taking shots on Hasty and Harris are interesting. Those would be the 2 guys that should be active for this game. They weren't active last game, so it's tough to say like what exactly their roles will be. But I do think taking shots on them is interesting. I'm a little less interested in Ty Montgomery, even though I know he could have that pass game role, but he's 2,600, so he's got to do something to kind of pay off that tag. And he was used as a receiver last week, and we'll talk about receivers here next, but they're without the same receivers that they were last week. So he ran around on 6% of dropbacks. I kind of think that's just what he's going to be, and I don't expect him to be too involved as a traditional running back in that sense.
Cool. Yeah, I don't have anything to add on those secondary guys, but I think certainly taking shots on them in non-Zeke lineups. Obviously, you can play them with Zeke too, but I would probably try to get them in non-Zeke lineups personally, just for the leverage. All right, Pittsburgh backs. We do have a full 2-headed monster here these days. I think everyone's on the Jaylen Warren train at this point. Welcome to the bandwagon. I've been here for 2 years. Happy to have all of you. But I think it's actually gotten to the point where it's not like the usage profile between these 2 players, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, is that different. And I think the hate's gone a little too far on Najee. He's getting some high leverage touches around the goal line. I'm speaking out of my ass right now, by the way. I don't have any of the data in front of me. I'm just, from what I've seen the last couple of weeks, I know he's getting some goal line touches. $400 more, a lot less ownership. I guess there's an injury tag there. He's expected to play. Any thoughts here on the Steelers' two main backs here?
Yeah, this is interesting. I think Jaylen Warren is probably right there in that cash game contest discussion. He's probably one of the better overall plays on the slate, just given what we know heading into the game. I think there's a chance they could pull back the reins a little bit on Najee coming out of the game last week with the knee injury and missing practice on Tuesday. Sounds like he's a little bit sore, but going to be just fine to go. You could see that thing potentially flare up in game, or they could just use this as a natural spot to rest him a little bit more. However, this is a totally resilient guy. He's played every game in 2+ seasons, which is kind of a rarity at the running back position. So I don't expect too many limitations here on Najee, but I do think the field is going to overreact. A lot of it kind of coming down to the efficiency stuff. But I mean, Harris still leads the backfield in rushing attempts, rushing share, 54% to 33%. And he's been dealing with handling more of the short down and distance stuff, 70% to 38%. He's going to be more utilized near the goal line. So we're talking about all this play volume not potentially being there. If you just want a guy that's more likely to score a touchdown and rack up rushing attempts, that's going to be Harris. Where Warren kind of separates is obviously as a pass catcher. He's got a 14% target share. He's going to be more used in long down and distance in 2-minute situations. And very, very, very clearly, I think at this point, the much more explosive back. He's got an 8.8% explosive rush rate to Najee Harris is 6.9%. He's got a lower stuff rate, higher missed tackles forced per attempt. So if you think there's a guy out of these 2 that could break off a big one, certainly going to be Warren out of between him and Najee Harris. So I think that's going to drive ownership a little bit more in his direction. You're seeing it reflected as such: 62.1% total ownership, 14.2% captain ownership. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I think this is a good spot where they're really closely projected, really closely priced just to flip those bad boys. Maybe you come in your own personal set, 45% exposure to Warren or somewhere thereabouts, 8 to 9 to 10% captain ownership, and then get way overweight on Najee and just hope he's the one that, either A, finds the end zone, or B, just racks up more volume.
Yeah, I think there's higher touchdown equity on Najee, so I would agree that I would flip it. I don't think it's debatable that Warren's the better player at this point. I do find it interesting that Warren's 400 less when on the last couple main slates, Najee's been the cheaper player. I know Dink was into Najee on Establish a Million last week. I was very into him as well. My own personal stuff didn't quite get there, but when he's like 5-1 on a main slate with a pretty good role, it's interesting. I don't know how much I love this spot in general. Like, again, I think you're going to see the volume here, but because these guys cancel each other out a little bit, plus the mixture of Mitch Trubisky taking 3, 4, 5, 6 carries with some red zone touchdown upside, and the fact that the Patriots have a good defense, like, I don't mind trying to flip this and get into the Steelers passing offense. And we'll talk about that in a second. I know you kind of talked about that at the top, but I think that's an interesting way to approach it. Obviously you can't fade these guys. The volume's going to be there. But just something to consider.
Look, that's a really interesting angle. This is, and maybe we've kind of understated how good this Patriots run defense is. They rank first in rush EPA per play, first in the entire league in rush EPA per play. They are 28th in pass EPA per play. So keep that in the back of your mind as we get to receivers here next. But first in rush EPA per play, they're allowing the league's third lowest explosive rush rate at 2.4%. They rank first in stuff rate at 53.4%. Not a whole lot of yards created before contact against them either. So look, what I envision happening here and kind of like trying to get this game script to play out in my mind is this new brain trust for the Steelers, offensive brain trust for the Steelers has been very run heavy in the first two games. They've got a backup quarterback under center. They're at home as 6-point favorites against a pretty bad Patriots team, all things equal. What I think they want to do is come out of the gates, trying to establish it with a combination of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. I think they're going to get pretty damn frustrated pretty damn quickly because it's going to be a lot of 2-3 yard rushing attempts, a couple of 3-and-outs potentially. Maybe they break one for 5 or 6 and get a first down. I think they're going to eventually get frustrated with how inefficient their rushing attack has been, and then try to start to play against this Patriots man coverage and allow Mitch Trubisky to let it rip at least a little bit, right? Maybe not full blown air it out, maybe not full blown shootout style, but I do think once we see that happen, that's when we get into the excitement of the Steelers pass catchers that we have a little bit. And I think it's going to be on their own. So if you think that, kind of thinking along the same lines that I am, that the Steelers rushing attack is going to be as inefficient as I think it may be, this could be a good spot to gain a huge amount of leverage if you think these two guys cancel each other out a little bit, and just in general that this offense is going to be a little bit less likely to establish it against a really good Patriots run defense.
Yeah, and again, you could throw in that Mitch Trubisky wrench as well, as far as like a higher rushing equity, in my opinion, than Kenny Pickett. That it's just there's enough variables there that like that's the way I'd approach the Steelers offense tonight. Again, not fully fading the Pittsburgh running backs, but I would be heavy on the receivers. So let's talk about those pass catchers. Let's stay on the Pittsburgh side because I think it's a much more interesting one to talk about. I was another. I thought I read that. Oh, I'm on FanDuel somehow. How'd that happen? Hold on, something just happened. I was going to say, I thought I read in your article that George Pickens was the most expensive receiver on the slate. and then I just saw Deontay Johnson was more expensive. So I got confused for a second. So anyway, what I was going to say is I'm very surprised to see George Pickens be more expensive than Deontay Johnson. I don't think that's right. I think there's bigger playability in Pickens. I think we all know that. I think the volume on Deontay is still so much higher. And in a game that features a 30-point total with someone that just can earn targets in full point PPR DraftKings, I do not understand that. Right now, we don't have enough of an ownership gap between Deontay and Pickens for me to reverse that stuff either. So it's a Deontay spot for me. I'm not seeing enough leverage here to look into Pickens personally, if I'm picking between the two. What say you?
Yeah, I'll make the bull case for both of these guys because I think this is kind of the most interesting spot on the slate to attack. I think you could end up seeing ownership ultimately creep up higher on both Najee and Jaylen Warren just because they have higher base projections and you don't really need the salary for Deontay or Pickens. I mean, they just project worse, not just for us, but for everybody else in the industry as well. So I think you could see this gap widen for both receivers from the running backs a little bit. I think I'm with you on Deontay straight up, but just look, like if you sort by projection, you have Zeke, Mitch, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Bailey Zappi even has a higher projection than 10K George Pickens. And then you go right below him and you've got $6,600 Steelers defense that I know everyone's going to be excited to talk about. I think George Pickens is going to ultimately just fall in this no man's land where it's like, God, can I really play George Pickens with Mitch Trubisky under center in a game that's got a 29.5 point total? I know we took an under in the props team, and props and DFS are totally separate, but we've took an under on 3.5 receptions for George Pickens in this game. I just don't think there's a lot of people out there excited right now to play George Pickens. And I mean, rightfully so from a volume perspective relative to, looking between him and Deontay Johnson. But I think there's still some bull cases to be made here. And a lot of it is kind of just that big playability that he has. He's still behind Johnson in terms of target share, air yard share, red zone target share, end zone targets, kind of whatever you want to look at. But I keep going back to the fact that the Patriots defense is worse against the pass, and the amount of man coverage that they play, I think, is a good thing for Pickens to win kind of one-on-one down the field type situations. And you could see Mitch try to throw it up to him. So that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on. I totally agree with you that I need this ownership gap to be a little bit wider. If I get the sense that in some of the sharper contests, like smaller field stuff, that Pickens is going to be kind of in that high 20s to really low 30s range, and maybe the running backs steam up even a little bit more, I do want to take shots on him in flex. And, if you're going to give me 5 to 6% cap, then I think that that's pretty sharp as well. But kind of agree just in general that this the Steelers wide receiver room is the spot to attack from a little bit of a leverage perspective.
Yeah, I totally get the bull case on both guys. I'm going to double down on Deontay. I think if I'm to take a receiver that I think, first of all, Mitch Trubisky is going to want a safety blanket in his first start in a while. If you look back on those years in 2018-19, we'll talk about Allen Robinson in a second. He had one receiver that was good. It was Allen Robinson. Profiles not that dissimilar, where like Robinson's average yards per catch those years were like 11.5, 12. Deontay's 12.3 this year. Like middle of the field, safe, target earner, can get open. And it's a game where we just need volume. We need raw points. That's what we're saying, right? Like Deontay, to me, if you wanted to double up that ownership and just like that's the way I take my stand against the running backs. Like again, I don't think Pickens is a bad play. There's high one. It could take one big play, right? One for 60 and a touchdown, even at 10K could get it done, right? Like we talked about before. But I think we might have 10 catches in Deontay's bag, and that's really what I'd rather bank on. So I really like Deontay Johnson here actually a lot, probably more than I have in many spots, and I know our projections have always been high on him because he's been such a target earner, but he can't really put it together. Now you're playing with a backup quarterback, but it just seems to me that's the guy I want personally. It's interesting. We do have a 0.7 higher base projection when they have the same ceiling. It kind of shows you that Pickens is that big play threat. So don't get me wrong. I'm acknowledging that. Deontay also has the threat of Pat Freiermuth being back in this offense for targets in the middle of the field. Maybe he's the safety blanket. Any thoughts on Pat tonight? Kind of came crashing back to earth last week.
Yeah. This is the interesting one because like salary doesn't matter, but if you had a $7,400 Pat Freiermuth on any other slate, you'd kind of be, turning the other cheek because outside of finding the end zone and maybe at this price tag, finding the end zone twice, he doesn't really have much of a ceiling. He's not a huge target earner. This isn't a pass first offense. There's not a ton of volume there. But because the salary doesn't matter, like you're looking at 7,400, you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of talk myself into it. But he's going to be roughly as owned as George Pickens and not too much off Deontay. Like I think unless he scores a touchdown, you're not really too upset with fading Pat Freiermuth. And so where I think he's a little bit overpriced, too close, at least for me, to Najee, and too close to me to Jaylen Warren, and he's going to be owned. I think this is kind of a spot that I'm just okay wiping my hands from and just saying I'm okay being underweight here.
Yeah. I agree. I want, this is the way I want to attack this slate. So I want exposure to all three of these guys. And I don't mind like the Trubisky captain with doubles of two of these guys too. So I just want to sprinkle them in the same way I would Pickens and Deontay. Again, for me, in this game, just kind of the way I anticipate it going. The Patriots are pretty good against tight ends. Yeah, I think Freiermuth would be my third favorite of the three, even with the cheaper tag. 2 weeks ago, that was Pickett, first of all. Those are two guys that certainly have the chemistry. If you go back to last year towards down the stretch, right? Freiermuth was a really good fantasy tight end with Pickett. This is a different thing. I think Trubisky probably would like the receivers more, just thinking back on the way he likes to push the ball, but who's to say? And by the way, I don't want to get people to misunderstand what I said. I said Deontay had a similar profile to those Allen Robinson years from a role standpoint. If you actually look at the body type, Pickens is like pretty similar to Robinson in his heyday, like a 6'2", 215 type guy. That's what Robinson was. Deontay's obviously smaller than that. Let's talk Allen Robinson because old friend, right? We saw the Joe Flacco, Elijah Moore. What did Adam call it? The previous NFL stop shower narrative, the PNSSN. I don't know if Allen Robinson has anything left in the tank. That's the difference here. But you got to imagine there's a level of comfort there where by far the main target of Mitch Trubisky's career is going to be on the field with him tonight. You got to figure he likes that. 3K. Again, I want to attack these receivers, so I'll take some shots in large field for sure.
It's funny because until it got pointed out in chat, I had completely forgotten that Mitch and Allen Robinson had played together at Chicago.
Good seasons
and Allen
together.
Robinson.
I mean, Robinson had 3 really good seasons in a row with Chicago. Most of that was with Trubisky. His second year in the league on Jacksonville, that was his best overall year. But one of those years, he had like 102 catches. So yeah, I mean, it was legit good football from Allen Robinson. He was
and I completely dismissed it, and I was wrong to do so. I do think that while we should not overrate those things, and maybe the field's going to tonight, maybe as much as it's brought up already, if the field's going to kind of think, okay, we've got this previous NFL stop shower narrative thing going on here. I think the one thing you can hang your hat on with Allen Robinson is that he's on the field a ton still. Even since Deontay Johnson's been back, he's going to be the third wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets. He's going to be in the slot a bunch, which maybe creates a little bit more comfort level for Mitch Trubisky, even more than these guys just having played together. He's going to have a fairly low ADOT, kind of in the middle of the field, the spot where you think historically this is where we could get our quarterback into rhythm a little bit. I know Deontay fills that role plenty as well, but I think that's the biggest positive in Allen Robinson's direction is that, you've got a 65% route participation rate. Every once in a while, guys that are on the field that much, even if they're total dust, even if they're way past their prime and shouldn't be out there that much, if they're on the field that much, they can run into high target games. And if you're going to tell me that a receiver that's on the field as often as Allen Robinson is, and he's going to be 6% owned, I think that's an okay spot. I think that's a spot that in MME, in even 20 max, you could have 3 out of 20 lineups be Allen Robinson lineups, and you'd be overweight there. You could have 4 and be way overweight, something like that. But I think in a 150 set where being unique matters, I think, doubling up on that level of projected total ownership is totally reasonable. And I expect to be way overweight on Mr. Robinson tonight.
I'm really sad for Allen Robinson that the 2 quarterbacks of his career, 4 years in Jacksonville, 4 years in Chicago, were Blake Bortles and Mitch Trubisky. Tries to go to the Rams last year, probably was already a little cooked, gets a Stafford year where he was hurt for most of the year. Like, what could have been in this career? Because he had, again, 4 like elite, at least 3 elite NFL receiver seasons. Like, was an excellent, such a fun player in his prime. Like, I loved watching Allen Robinson, just a beast out there. Would like to see him turn back the clock one night. Maybe it's tonight. I don't think so in a 29.5 point total, but I'd like to see one legacy game from A-Rob out there. Calvin Austin, we saw a little bit at the beginning of the season start to crack in as a play, and also a big play threat. I think it's a little too thin on this slate where, like, if I'm taking a big play guy, I want it to be Pickens. If I'm taking a shot on one of these secondary guys, I probably want it to be Robinson. But no doubt that there's maybe, one big play in there and he's 2,400. Any interest in the rookie?
I think it's probably a little bit too cute, but look, you're talking about a guy that's 1% owned. I think as an MME sprinkle, it's fine if you came in with 2, 3, 4% and hope that he runs into the right lineup if he does in fact break a big play. But you're looking at a guy that's going to be on the field for roughly 1 in every 4 Mitch Trubisky dropbacks. It's not really something that you're going to be overly excited about.
All right, agreed. Connor Hayward, I guess, would be the tight end punt of choice. Darnell Washington out there a little bit. It has not kind of been. I was taking him like round 20 best ball some stuff in DraftKings, just because I thought, hey, maybe this guy can have like 4 or 5 touchdown upside. Have not seen that out of the 6'8" rookie tight end, but Connor Hayward is out there a little bit. So if you want to take shots, there.
Full blown touchdown or bust MME dart throws. Not much else to say about that. But you're looking at guys that are the legit stone men and are going to be 1 to 2% owned. I think they should make your MME player pool.
Cool. Man, of course, we're already at 40 minutes. We haven't even spoken about New England pass catchers yet, but that's the good stuff you get from us here at the best game of the year. So, of course, Cody, the decision of the night is Devontae Parker versus Juju Smith-Schuster as we continue to play. What year is it? And it's really amazing. Devontae, 5,600. Don't think he's good at football anymore. Juju Smith-Schuster, 3,800. Don't think he's good at football anymore. Tyquan Thornton, 3,400. I like his profile. Dropped a wide open deep ball last week. Clearly can't get on the field. Wasn't able to beat out anyone in the preseason. Still a very fast player. To me, maybe the most exciting of this group. Before we talk about Hunter Henry, any thoughts on these 3 Patriots receivers?
Yeah, I think the biggest bonus here is that Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte, as written in the article, is it Booth or Boutte? Either way, already ruled out, so we don't have to deal with that. We have a 1-game sample to look back on and how the team is going to deploy these receivers. We should expect them to deploy these receivers going forward. Devontae Parker going to primarily play on the perimeter, as he did last week. Ran around an 81.8% of dropbacks. He led the team with a 36% target share, 52.5% air yard share on a 15.4 yard ADOT. We talked earlier in the show about guys that can get it done on low volume, even if it's pretty inefficient. A guy that can maybe turn a couple of targets into 2 for 60 and 1. I actually think Devontae Parker kind of fits that mold a little bit. The targets that he get probably going to be pretty ugly targets, but there is a potential that he gets one downfield and could house it. I kind of like his profile a little bit more than Juju Smith-Schuster, who's going to be operating a little bit on the perimeter, a little bit out of the slot, lower ADOT type guy. I don't think he's nearly as likely to break one. You kind of see that reflected in the ceiling projections there as well. 16 DraftKings point projection ceiling for Devontae Parker, 11.4 for Juju Smith-Schuster, roughly the same ownership. Price doesn't matter much. I think Devontae Parker is the preferred option there for me. And then I think Tyquan Thornton at 3,400, same base projection as Juju, higher ceiling projection, which I think makes sense in my mind. Kind of passes the eye test and going to be lower owned. I think Tyquan Thornton is the other guy that makes sense from kind of a, hey, I want to catch lightning in a bottle type scenario where he's probably going to get even fewer targets than Devontae Parker, maybe only 1 or 2, but a guy that's clearly a speedster, one of the fastest 40 times in recent memory. If he gets behind the defense and him and Bailey Zappi can connect, he could easily pay off that $3,400 price tag with just 1 or 2 targets, assuming he and Zappi can connect. So I think price, ownership, profile, everything included, I think I would rank him Devontae Parker 1, Tyquan Thornton 2, Juju Smith-Schuster 3. And I think because they might funnel into lineups together, I certainly want to do a max 2 if the lineup does not include Bailey Zappi. And man, you could really even come close to just doing a max 1 here, because it's tough to paint a scenario where multiple of these guys go off in the same game, given the overall offensive environment that we're projecting.
Yeah, I do agree with that for sure. If you want to paint the Juju bull case, to me, it's twofold. 1, if you're into revenge narratives, got that. 2, it's the more serious one is low A dot, easy target stuff. I think he's the likeliest of those 3 to get that, right? Parker's kind of a midfield, still a little bit of a downplay threat. Tyquan certainly the downplay threat, the downfield threat. Juju for sure would be the safety blanket for of the receivers for Bailey Zappi, in my opinion. So if you just think you need volume, perhaps he can compile a little bit up. You probably need to boost his projection a little bit if you want to play that card, but I think you can. Like, I think there's I think he beats our base projection with like a 5 for 50, like in many scenarios. So I don't think that's, or even like a 5 for 36 or something. I don't think that's like totally out of the question. So, I think it's kind of negligible here. Thornton for me is by far my favorite. And I also want to play Steelers heavy stuff, particularly I already kind of talked about being in the pass game. I love Thornton as a bring back and like Steelers 4-2s or 5-1s or whatever. I think that's kind of sharp. Again, dropped a wide open, basically what would have been a touchdown last week. Like, this guy has talent. He's just one of those frustrating guys that can't put it all together. Maybe tonight we luck into a long touchdown or something like that. And if you get a long touchdown from any of these 3 receivers, I can almost guarantee at these prices, they'll be optimal.
Easily.
Yep. We'll talk about Hunter Henry. Any interest in Jalen Reagor as the wide receiver 4 here?
Not a lot here. Didn't get on the field much last week, and I kind of expect that to be the same this week, which based off of what we saw. You're looking at a 12% route participation last week with kind of a similar setup here. He ended up getting targeted, but I mean, you're hoping really to catch lightning out of a bottle here, and I think that the paths for him doing that are pretty thin. So MME 150 max plus type player pool, makes your player pool type guy, but not somebody I'm falling all over myself to get into. And, really kind of same story for Mike Gesicki. We thought with Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte being out last week, we would see a little bit more 2 wide receiver 2 tight end sets for the Patriots. We did not. It was actually Mike Gesicki's lowest route participation of the season. Who knows if that was doghouse related, if that was just matchup related. I really don't know. But this is a guy that had been running around on roughly 50% of dropbacks in every game last week, or in every game of the season, down to 12% last week. And, Pharaoh Brown was there at 18% route participation, has not been targeted in in any of the last 4 games. So again, outside of like real full-blown enemy dart throw type stuff, I don't really have much interest in Gesicki or Pharaoh Brown either.
So let's talk Hunter Henry then, because, you can make an argument for sure that of all these guys, we talked about Devontae, Juju, Thornton, he might be the safest play. As far as just like, we know he's going to be out there. I'll probably get some targets. I'll lean on you to tell me what kind of matchup this is with Pittsburgh for a tight end perspective. Has had a solid season for what he's been. He was more at the beginning of the season where he's going off, but still someone that they trust to be out there. Any thoughts on Hunter Henry here?
Yeah, I think he's right up there with those other guys. A guy that's going to be on the field for 75% of the dropbacks. He's running most of his routes in line. He's got a 13.7% target share, 15.8% air yard share. So this is a guy that, to me, feels like he's got a pretty safe floor. Safe is relative in the terms of this slate. I don't think any of these guys really have a safe floor. But in terms of this slate, probably the safest floor at the Patriots pass catching core. But you look at his game logs, and if he does not find the end zone, he does not provide a usable box score in terms of, really looking for GBP winning upside. He had 17 in week 1, 17 in week 2, and then went, 9 or less in every game outside of that, except for week 9, that week 9 game where they dropped back a ton against the Commanders. So I think this is another spot where you're probably looking at a really secure 4, 5, 6 DraftKings points for Hunter Henry, which, actually doesn't sound that bad on this slate, but I don't think you're going to get that 12, 13, 14 unless he finds his way to the end zone. So just like a lot of the rest of these guys, he kind of profiles as a touchdown or bust tournament dart throw. And if he's the guy that you expect to score a touchdown, he's the guy that you can target. But really, to me, profiles more as kind of a high floor, low ceiling type of guy.
Okay, Cody. Maybe no slate in history that I can think of where defenses will probably be more popular. I haven't even looked at ownership yet. I'm just assuming. 6,600 Pittsburgh Steelers defense still coming through with 50% total ownership, almost 10% captain ownership. I mean, you get it. It's Bailey Zappi, a historically bad Patriots offense. You're at home. Paint the bear case for me. Why would you fade this?
Yeah, a lot of it just comes down to volatility. A lot of it just comes down to volatility at the position, and you can't say anything bad about the on paper matchup for the Steelers. They're 6-point home favorites. They can generate a pass rush. This is not a great Patriots offensive line. They have Bailey Zappi under center and probably one of the worst skill position cores in the league, at least in week 14, with Zeke Elliott in the backfield and Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Tyquan Thornton at the wide receiver positions. This is a really, really, really great matchup for the Steelers defense. The bear case here, I think, from at least like an X's and O's and on-field perspective, obviously the bear case is it's defensive scoring, throw your hands up. It's super volatile. No one can predict it accurately. Who knows what's going to happen? And that's kind of like the ultimate case that I'm going to come back to on whether I play this or how much I play the Steelers defense personally. But from an on-field perspective, like, what if the Patriots just go out and run the ball on 60% of their offensive plays and you only get like 22 dropbacks from Bailey Zappi? Is there enough in those 22 dropbacks or whatever that maybe even less for the Steelers to generate a slate winning score at 6,600? Maybe it just takes one dropback and Bailey Zappi throws a pick six. That could certainly happen. Maybe there's 3 or 4 sacks on just a handful of dropbacks. You never know. That can always happen. But I think the one thing I keep coming back to, I expect this game to be extremely low scoring and extremely run heavy. If it's going to be extremely run heavy on the Patriots side, that means way fewer opportunities for the Steelers defense to rack up fantasy points. There's going to be way fewer opportunities for sacks, strip sacks, pick sixes, and things like that we need our defenses to have in order to provide a score. So I think there's probably a really safe floor here, which is why I wrote him up as a cash game option. But maybe the ceiling aspect is a little bit overstated here because we're expecting to see a lot more rushing attempts.
That's fair. Yeah, I like that breakdown. Good stuff. What about the Patriots side? Certainly a good matchup for them too, right? Mitch Trubisky certainly one prone to mistakes and maybe one willing to push the ball downfield a little bit more than Bailey Zappi is. So, and again, a good Patriots defense. So, you're getting $1,600 of savings from the Steelers. You're getting 17% less total ownership percentage points. Almost half the ownership a captain. Any preference for the Pats defense here? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think straight up, if you're just saying I need to have one defense, it's got to either be the Steelers or the Patriots. I need to have one defense in a lineup. For me, if I'm forced to choose, I would prefer the Patriots. I think they're just going to come in with much less ownership. And God, I think you could see the Steelers defense push closer to 50 and push double digits at captain. I think there's a little bit of a ceiling here on the Patriots defense as a 6-point road underdog. And the fact that they're going to be playing up, you're going to run into a bunch of Mitch Trubisky ownership and Jalen Warren ownership, and people will try to find their way to Deontay and Pickens. They're not going to want to be playing the Patriots defense against all of those offensive pieces. But I think the same bear case can be painted here for the Patriots as we just painted for the Steelers. This is just going to be a game that features a lot of rushing attempts. Maybe there aren't as many opportunities for the Patriots defense to rack up scoring on interceptions and strip sacks and things like that. But I think from kind of an on-field perspective, you're right. You're going to see a few more dropbacks likely for the Steelers offense as they get growingly frustrated with how good the Patriots run defense is. And Mitch Trubisky is a guy that's willing to throw it down the field a little bit more than I think Bailey Zappi will be. And so that can create some of those turnover-worthy throws and some of those opportunities for the Patriots defense to rack up production that way. This is just going to be one of those spots. You can see it in chat. You can see it if you pull up Twitter. You can see everyone trying to make the jokes where you plug in both defenses and both kickers. And then the joke is, okay, now what? Right? I mean, you're going to see a lot of those lineups where it's, 2 defenses plus a kicker, or a defense plus a kicker, or 2 defenses and a kicker. I just think that this combination of these specialists is going to be quite popular. And for me, I just want to play a little bit into a different game script.
Cool. A lot of chat talking a lot about defense and kickers tonight, playing both of all these guys. Yes, Joe mentions in chat, Maryland Terrapin, Chatter Island has been awful. So there's no doubt about that. Chris Boswell, old reliable here. I don't know what weather's looking like in Pittsburgh tonight, but you could definitely make the case that if ownership or if scoring is going to occur on this slate, it'll often come in the form of 3 points. So kicker thoughts here, not too much ownership on either guy. I thought maybe this would get it juiced up.
Yeah, ownership looks pretty reasonable, especially on Boswell. Again, as a home favorite, 6-point home favorite, kicking in kind of the friendly confines of his home stadium, higher team total. Not expecting a ton of ownership here because, the salary stuff doesn't matter quite as much. And then you're looking at a guy that is projected around, people like Juju Smith-Schuster and Hunter Henry and, others that I think will pull in a little bit of ownership as well. So I think it'll be fairly muted for Chris Boswell. I think he's kind of right on the outside of like fringe cash game consideration. I don't necessarily think you need to go there, but I do like him in a game that you expect to, finish 17-6 or something like that. And kind of on the same token, I think Ryland is a little bit interesting here. Not going to be a ton of ownership. There generally is not much ownership on kickers like Ryland who have a really low team total. But if he's the reason why the Patriots reach or exceed their low team total, you're going to be pretty happy if you had him at 4,600 and 16.8% ownership. So I think both of these guys end up being they end up being optimal a little bit more frequently than they're projected to be owned and make for it relatively good plays individually.
All right, Cody. 8 championships between these two teams between the years 2002 and 2019. Almost half of all the titles accounted between the Steelers and the Patriots over that time. And here we are in 2023 with a 30-point total. Mitch Trubisky versus Bailey Zappi. I know the Patriots Steelers have a winning record. Let's be real. They're not a good team. 2 bad teams. And as Bunk says in The Wire, makes me sick, motherfucker, how far we done fell. Because this is really sad that it's a Patriots Steelers game that would have been an elite December game for like the vast majority of the last 20 years. And this is what we get. But nonetheless, there's still $300K to win on DraftKings in the main flagship. There's money to be made tonight. Cody, who was your flag plant?
Yeah, going the expensive route has yet to fail me. And I think that there's enough of an ownership discount here where I can go the expensive route again and not get ridiculed for going the expensive route. If this guy was higher owned, I think I would take the criticism from the chat on the chin, but I'm not gonna stand for it here. I think George Pickens ends up being the optimal captain tonight. I know that Deontay Johnson has a much better base role. The underlying usage metrics for Deontay Johnson are much better, and that's why he projects much better for us as well. Part of that is going to be the reason why George Pickens is not going to be highly owned. Even if people don't want to get excited about Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris, I think they'll find their way onto Deontay Johnson at 9,800, much more so than they will George Pickens when it's all said and done and they're finally clicking in lineups. I don't think there's going to be a lot of volume here. There's potential for Deontay Johnson to have a 10-target type game. I just don't know if that type of volume exists. So if that's the case, I want a guy that can pay off his price tag on just a few receptions. And that guy is George Pickens, winning deep downfield against the Patriots man coverage. I like George Pickens as the optimal captain tonight.
Cody, we're going head to head. I think I was forecasting it a little bit, but I think this is just, even if you think this game goes over, I think it's coming at the volume of Deontay Johnson. If it goes under, I think he's got the best chance of putting up some just volume that's going to get you the raw points you need. I know he's been disappointing for the target share that he's earned over the last 2 years. Obviously, last year he couldn't find the end zone. This year, the Steelers' offense has been kind of messy, especially during the Matt Canada days. There's no doubt. I know he might come with a good amount of ownership. I don't really care. I just think to me, it's the best clean, pure play of all offensive skill possessions players on a slate that I'm not excited to play. The running backs, there's no doubt. Volume is king in fantasy. So all 3 of those guys, I get it. But I kind of want to play it the other way, just from like, let me flip the matchup side of this. Who can kind of be an extension of that run game for easy targets, stuff like that. To me, it's Deontay Johnson. So that's going to be my official flag point. We're going head to head with the Steelers receivers, but I will give my spicy one, and that's Tyquan Thornton. I think if I'm investing in a Patriots pass catcher, it's very easily this kind of unknown who's fast, who has some talent, that is cheap, not a lot of ownership. Like it checks all the boxes of the guy I'd want to take a shot on in a game like this. So those are my 2. I gave you 2 for the best game of the year.
I do think that whether you agree with Gary or myself, or wherever you fall in the George Pickens versus Deontay Johnson discussion, I do think this is the best way to attack this slate from a contrarian angle perspective. It's a 30-point total. It's Mitch Trubisky and Bailey Zappi under center. No one is excited about offensive production here, but all of a sudden you're telling me that in 2023, the highest owned players on the slate are going to be some combination of 2 defenses and Ezekiel Elliott and some combination of Jalen Warren and or Najee Harris in a split backfield against the league's best run defense, and these wide receivers are going to go a little bit underowned, seems like a pretty good GPP spot to me.
Agreed. All right, everyone. We almost went an hour on Steelers Patriots, so you're welcome. Please give this video a thumbs up. That's the least you could do for us. This free content for you all. Please subscribe to everything we got going on here at Establish the Run on YouTube. Please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you want. You can talk about how handsome I am, how ugly Cody is. You can talk about the weird bat katana thing in the background of my video. Whatever you want. Please interact with this video in some way. We'd appreciate it very, very much. I'm just kidding. Cody's a great looking man. We are appreciative that you sat with us for these 55 minutes. We'll be back on Monday night. Cody, I think, are we doing a 2-game show? Hopefully we get Adam to join us, maybe.
We'll get Adam's blessing. Maybe Adam will join us, but I think we're going to plan on a 2-game show. The reason why we're waiting is we're waiting to see what DraftKings does with the actual contest. I suspect that it'll probably be a pretty big 2-game slate, maybe $500K to first, maybe $1 million to first, and much smaller showdown slates. So keep an eye out for that, but I would suspect that Monday's show will be the 2-game Monday slate.
All right. Excited for that. I have to jump over to NBA streets. We have a 5 o'clock NBA start tonight, Eastern, for the semifinals of the in-season tournament. If you're into that kind of thing, go check out establishtheRun.com/subscribe for NBA stuff. We're crushing it over there. Our props team continues to crush. Our DFS stuff continues to crush. We are the best, if I do say so in my own humble opinion. All right. I've gone totally off the rails here, Cody. Anything else for the people?
I think that's it. Sim analysis for ETR subscribers on the NFL side will be up in likely a couple hours. I, of course, will have final ownership updates closer to inactives, a little bit closer to lock. And if you have any questions for me specifically, I will be hanging out in the Established Run Discord as well.
Beautiful. All right. Good luck, everybody. We will see you on Monday. Take care.